I'm Amy, and I love this theme because, can you hear me? Is this good? Oh, there we go. I got to be really close. Okay. Because I've experienced a few shades of alone. As a kid, I loved being the center of attention, and I proudly loved being alone. I got sent to the principal's office for tap dancing on my teacher's desk. I was known to be in third grade and just move my chair to the wall so I could have a blank space to just have my daydreams. And my teacher would be like, Amy, do you want to just join the rest of the class? And I would be like, no, I'm having my daydreams right now. So that was how I lived, and I love being alone. And I love being the center of attention. I would spill my apple juice on the floor at snack time and lick it up for applause. And, all three. So that probably was not the most sanitary thing. Is my mother just going to make commentary the entire time? You're taking my 18 minutes. Shh. Oh my. Okay, 18 minutes. I have. But the apple juice thing has nothing to do with what happened many years later when I did get sick eventually. I was healthy my entire life. This happened on the night of Passover. We usually, food is a big part of our lovely Jewish lives. And every Passover we had 30 people over and a really big celebration. And that night, this is my senior year of high school, I started getting a stomach ache and it wasn't going away. And it was not the matzah. And so everything just escalated very quickly. So it didn't go away the next day, and my father, who is a physician, he came home from work and he didn't like that I was still in pain, so he just decided to take me to the emergency room for an x-ray. And of course my mother goes, just one x-ray, but apparently on the way there, hang in with me here. This is going to escalate. And I'm trying to get it in. But so my cheeks actually perforated because there was so much pressure building up inside my abdomen. I got sepsis, and I guess if I had gotten to the emergency room minutes later, the fluid would have gone to all of my internal organs and I would have died. And I just remember being in a ton of pain, just screaming at everyone. And then I collapsed. Apparently, I'm just going to say apparently a lot for the rest of this. But I guess a surgeon was there. And you can ask my dad for the details later. I don't really get into the medical stuff. I don't really have the stomach for it. You'll get the pun later. So the surgeons cut into me, and there was so much pressure that my stomach literally hit the ceiling of the operating room because there was so much pressure. And both my lungs collapsed, and I needed 122 units of blood, and I almost died. And I had just gotten my college acceptance letters that week. I was your typical, type A high school student. I applied to 17 colleges. And that morning, I was debating, I got into the musical theater program at University of Michigan and Northwestern. And that was the biggest, conflict in my life. So my family, they just kind of like the Jews of Egypt, they just left their home and lived in the ICU, for months with me, and really was my support while I was having dreams in a coma, which were very pleasant when I was in a coma. But then I woke up, I guess, months later, trying to figure out what had happened. I was kind of in this alternate, reality where suddenly, people were telling me how much better I looked now. And, I was trying to figure out if I was still going to college. And then eventually, doctors told me what had happened. They said I had no stomach anymore and I couldn't eat or drink. And they didn't know if or when I'd ever be able to again. So now it was really what is going on? And, I lost faith in everything. I didn't really know what was real anymore. So I think the biggest fear when I woke up I think it was a benefit that I'd never really been sick my entire life, and I just woke up in this new world, because in my head, I was still me, and I was like fighting with the doctors, like, why can't I just, go out and do what I love to do? So I think my biggest fear was like, oh my God, like I'm going to be a has-been at 18. As a performer, you just want to connect with the world like that. That's how you give back, and that's how you feel connected and not alone. So I think my biggest fear was like, I'm not going to be vital. I'm not going to make my mark on the world and have my life force as a performer. So I think that kind of filled me with this manic drive to just think like, okay, whatever this is, like my job is to just get from this day to that day. Like I have to create. That's how I can document that any of this is happening. That's how I can document that I exist. And I did have a wonderful support system. My crazy family and 3 brothers, they brought their guitars to the hospital. I mean, everyone thought we were crazy because we were just acting like normal life. So eventually, I was discharged from the hospital when I was like the healthiest kid there, finally, that like they couldn't even get to stay in bed. And my mother was in my hospital bed watching like reruns of Everyone Loves Raymond. Everybody loves Raymond all day. So it's one thing being in the hospital and like you're in a nest and you're like protected from the outside world, but I was discharged from the hospital because medically I was stable now, but I still didn't have a stomach and I couldn't eat or drink. So they were like, just like go home on like IVs and like be in the normal world, but like we don't really know when you're gonna eat or drink again or if. So just, but like, carry on. So I have never been the person that just wants to like stay in bed and like watch movies while the world is going on. So, a month after I was discharged from the ICU, I tried out for Oliver, and for some reason with like bags all over and hooked up to IVs, and I couldn't even drink. And they ended up giving me the lead, which was crazy. I mean, they double cast it because I think they thought I was going to fall over. But I did whatever I could to create, because it was a way that I wouldn't feel alone. Like I ended up starting a chocolate business because I was so hungry that I wanted an excuse to, you take for granted how much of a community you feel when you can go grocery shopping and buy candy. And I needed some way to feel part of the world, because it was very lonely still, even when I was in the world. And I would, there's this barrier between you and other people when they're drinking a water bottle. And I remember like, it was like a slow motion, like Baywatch movie, watching them like take a sip at rehearsals, so as in the world as I tried to be, there was still this screen where I didn't know how I'd feel like a person again. So eventually that became, too much for me. And for years, I ended up locking myself in my room. And I would shut the blinds to shut out all outside stimulation, because I realized like I could not feel, because if I felt, I might feel hunger and that would kill me. So I would just lock myself in my room and journal for hours and hours just to keep my fingers moving and to document what was happening. And then I would just print out all the pages and slide them under my door to my mom. And she would like write notes on them like a teacher and then slide them back, because like it was the only way I could afford connection without feeling too much, to give into hunger. And, I went through various phases where I'd go through journaling, just to get from day to day and tell myself maybe like next week I can eat, next week I can eat. And long story short, it ended up being 6 years unable to eat or drink, and 27 surgeries later with a ton of, setbacks and things along the way. But when I finally could eat, I was really excited. I was like, this is going to be like the magic, like transport to the world and feel normal and everything, and finally feel connected. For years I was just talking to my parents and my doctors and living this very artificial world I had created in isolation to get through. So once I finally could eat, I was really pumped. But what I didn't realize is that food is such a it's an emotional, physical thing that connects everything. So I was feeling like happy in food, but oh crap, like now all of a sudden I'm processing all of this, and now I have to feel this pain and anger and all these emotions that I hadn't felt. And I was also processing for the first time that I was sexually abused before my coma by my voice teacher, who was my mentor in my life, that had happened right before this, that I'd kept in for years, for months and months, and had finally told my mother right before my coma. So that had happened, and then I had a coma and didn't have to process it. Now it was all coming in. And so clearly, the physical healing was one thing, but the emotional healing was really the sucky part, and that was up to me, which is why I really resonated with Marcie, because now my job was to find safe ways that I could process all these things, because these feelings were scaring the heck out of me. And suddenly I was realizing, oh wow, like maybe being numb and being alone, maybe there was something good in that. I didn't want to deal with all of these, all of these feelings. That was when I really discovered art. And Marcie mentioned coloring. And for me, it came as an accident. I was eating and things were good. And then I went to California and my wound just exploded. And I had to be air-vac'd back to Yale Medical Hospital. But with that obstacle, I discovered this amazing opportunity where I could actually find a friend in myself through art. My mom started bringing art supplies to the hospital. And the day I picked up a paintbrush for the first time, it was an amazing experience, because it was a way, just by drawing a tear, I found this safe way to see what I was feeling on the canvas, and it wasn't eating me alive, but I was with it. And suddenly whatever I was feeling was transformed onto the canvas. And in that hospital stay at Yale, I was there 4 months, and I made 70 mixed media paintings. I was discharged like a mixed media artist. I put up my first art show, and my art show was called Journey into Daylight. And I didn't know who would turn out, but hundreds of people showed up. And for the first time, what I was feeling was on a canvas for people to see. And I felt so part of the world at that point. And I didn't have the words to express what I'd been through, but it was in my art. It was in the universal, the tears and the raindrops and the flowers and the joy that I had found this amazing medium. Somehow my paintings were happy and I was in the world. And the words didn't come from that, but eventually they did come, because I'm trying to make a transition to how I eventually used those words and those journal entries to write a one-woman musical about my life, Gutless and Grateful. And I had never really talked about what I'd been through. I showed it through the art. How much do I'm good. Sorry, I know there's a lot of me. So I had never really talked about what I had been through. It was in the news, but I'd never talked about the sexual abuse, because the medical stuff was so huge. That was kind of, Westport woman goes years without eating and drinking. So I just decided, I'm just gonna go big or go home and share it all with total strangers and New York theater critics. So I put together Gutless and Grateful, and I premiered it at the Triad in 2012. And I had no idea what to expect. But what I didn't realize was that people actually resonated with my story. It wasn't just, oh my God, Amy, she went through this and that. By actually piecing together a narrative about my life, I was making meaning from this and making it just a detour in my life that other people could relate to, the fear, the anger, the uncertainty. And, when I realized that this story was a story that kind of we all experience, we all have things in life we don't expect, I made a hashtag out of it, because nothing means anything if it doesn't have a hashtag. I called myself a detourist, and started the Love My Detour campaign, which is for anyone that says anything unexpected in their life that just doesn't go as they plan. And when I started framing it as a detour, people would just suddenly melt. It brought people together. Suddenly, if you had gone through a divorce, a breakup, a breakdown, a different job, a good detour, maybe it was something you discovered that led you, to a good thing. My whole thing was, if you are a detourist, then you just keep following that path and you're curious to see, where it leads. And your only job as a detourist is to get from day to day until you find that flower. And years later, I can say that, I found the flower from my detour. And on that stage, in 2012, that was kind of my full circle moment. Wow, I see how all this led me to where I am. 4 days after that, I had my 27th surgery, which was my first elective surgery. It was a major setback. It turned into 3 emergency surgeries in 8 days. And it was very surreal because I had, it was my worst medical setback yet. I was 4 days before, I was just singing and dancing about being in the hospital and how cool it was I was on the other side. So it was another detour. But at that lowest point, I made some really big decisions. And I think I was able to make them because doing this show had filled me with confidence that, wow, the world is behind me. The world is, we've all been through I don't know. I just felt supported. So anyway, I decided at that point to apply to college at 25 again. I booked 2 theaters for a year from then to do another run of Gutless and Grateful because I was hooked on this feeling of being part of the world again. And because I was so ready to, be open and part of the world, and I missed creative writing, I'm like, you know what, let me do an online dating profile too. Because I never had a boyfriend really before, and I missed writing, and I was so ready to be in the world. So 4 months later, 2 weeks later, I met this guy, and he proposed 4 months later, and we got married, and it was the most amazing thing because for the first time, I actually had to connect to someone on a one-on-one level, and my heart was opened up, and I was in the world. And then I gave a TED talk about it, about how all these detours in life make you who you are. And then right after that, my husband text messaged me a divorce, and a marshal came to my house to give me papers. And then I was like, frick that detour. I said, I don't love my detour. This sucks. What is this detour crap? But then I was forced to actually think about that TED Talk and think about how, you don't really know where your detour is headed at that moment, and it sucks at that moment. I remember when I couldn't eat, and it sucked. The last 30 seconds. I got to get to the flower at my... Thanks. My stomach exploded. Give this sick girl another minute. I'm almost done. Okay. So, I really did have to think. Stop laughing at me. No, just kidding. My musical's a comedy. So at that moment, I really did have to think about, because at that, when I got that text message, I really thought my world was over. My detour was not supposed to go that way. But I can say, months later, everything does pass. And it's true. If you just step in that detour and be like, I'm just curious about where this path leads. And I trust that eventually that flower is going to be there, even if I don't really know what it is yet. And it's amazing how when you're in that position, it always feels the same. I never know how I'm going to get here. It's the worst feeling of alone, being this world of uncertainty. But I eventually did get there, and I realized what my flower was that being in this relationship, this marriage, it made me realize that I was capable of being loved and that I was a good catch. You know, it gave me confidence, and it taught me how to love, and that was my flower. And it is amazing, like in retrospect, how really only the flower remains. Just like in making art of our pain, of our, fear of our uncertainty, only the art remains. All the art that I created in hospitals, that's all I see now. I don't remember the pain, and everything passes. So I think that's what I realized from that, and that I am okay alone. Being, oh, my art's not up there anymore. Did it go? Yeah, you saw it. Oh, yeah. So that was the second thing I made in Yale Hospital. That all these things like made me realize more about myself, and that I really like myself, and I think that is the best kind of alone. Yeah, that's my story.
And she can tap dance too. As you're talking about the online dating profile, and I go, you must have had the most creative and vibrant online dating profile on the internet, probably.
It was really long. Yeah.
And what's this picture here then? Or a piece of art?
Do I talk in here?
Yeah. No.
That's I called it Fishing for Stars. Ooh, plug. I sell greeting cards of this online. But this was, so I really have to thank Yale, because a lot of this is toilet paper from their bathroom. and just, whatever kid, that's why I do a lot of creativity workshops that, like, anyone not only can create, but they should create. Because, like, I can't even say, like, just, like, working with this stuff was just the first way I could really experience what I was feeling. And, like, it's a happy painting now, but it was created from such a place of pain. And it's amazing how just doodling, things where we don't have our words to get in the way, just transform whatever we're feeling. So, yeah.
And I think that's it's a healthy way to deal with the aloneness or the pain, right? And to tell that story to others.
Especially for someone, and we all go through things where we need to numb ourselves. And I became the queen of dissociation. I was so good at just like shutting off all feeling because I didn't want to deal with it. But art was like the perfect thing to just hold my hand into it, because the truth is, if you're numb, you exist, but you don't have yourself. And I think that's the scariest kind of alone, when we don't have ourselves.
After hearing Amy talk and hearing her story, you're like Easter Island. I walk out with more questions than I walked in.
I have too many words in my head, so I'm an open book, and I have so much more to say, so you can ask me questions.